Hi, and welcome to the next video in our enablement series. Today, we will be covering an overview of compliance in Red Hat Advanced Cluster Security. My name is Eric Bannon. I am a Senior Specialist Solutions Architect here at Red Hat. The four things that we're going to go over are first, an overview of compliance, the dashboard, and the UI. Secondly, we'll go over exporting evidence reports for passing and failing. Third, we'll show you how policies inside the ACS policy engine are correlated to certain rules inside compliance standards. And then lastly, we'll show you the integration with the OpenShift compliance operator. Now, in terms of a general overview, the real intent behind compliance is to assess, check, and report on the compliance status of your containerized infrastructure. ACS comes out of the box with several default standards. The first is CIS benchmarks for both Docker and Kubernetes. Next, we have HIPAA compliance for healthcare, NIST 800-190 and 853, PCI DSS compliance, and lastly, by leveraging the compliance operator, organizations can leverage OpenSCAP rules to create tailored profiles for their environment. By scanning your environment based on these standards, you can expect to be able to evaluate your infrastructure for regulatory compliance, harden both Docker and Kubernetes, understand and manage the overall security posture of the environment, and to be able to get a detailed view of compliance status for clusters, namespaces, and nodes. Let's proceed into the first part of our enablement, the compliance dashboard, and a high-level overview. Once you're logged into ACS, you should see the Compliance tab on the left-hand side of your screen. When you click into this, you're going to be met with the overview and dashboard for compliance across the entire environment. You'll notice that it's organized based on different types of views in each of these dashboards, the first being on the top left, listing out the percentage of passing across each of the standards like the CIS Docker, HIPAA, NIST, and PCI. Next, you'll see different clusters. In my case, I have one cluster, but if you had multiple, you'd be able to see a bar chart of how you're doing in each of those individual clusters. And then you'll notice several more which are here, and you can investigate what each of those do in your own time. You'll notice I can look at this by cluster, by namespaces, by nodes, or deployments. So depending on how you want to view compliance in the results, I can select one of these to view it from each of those components. And the important thing to also mention is if this is an initial install of ACS, you will need to click this Scan Environment button, which will run the initial scan to present the data that you're seeing in each of these dashboards. You can also exclude certain standards if you want. So if I don't care about HIPAA or something else, I can choose which ones I want to see. And then within this, I can drill down into each individual dashboard. So for example, if I click into NIST 800-190, I'll see each of the controls associated with this standard. And you'll notice a percent compliance rating on the right. What ACS actually does is it gives you a control guidance that explains how we measure whether you're passing or failing against this specific control. So in the top, it actually lists the specific control and the language used within that standard provided by the compliance standard. And below that, it tells you how we're interpreting these results. So common ones you will see is things like unbounded network access from containers. Well, maybe one of the control guidances for this is that ACS suggests putting in network policies for your deployments. If you have those network policies in place, we're able to measure that. We're able to say that you are indeed compliant within Kubernetes and within OpenShift if those controls are in place. So this is just one example of the dashboard and the overview, but let's proceed into the next section. In this next section, we're going to explore exporting compliance reports and how to use those for different use cases. You want to be able to provide your auditors and internal stakeholders with evidence on how you're passing or failing each of these controls and what you're doing to address each of them. So in line with what we were showing before, let's go back into the NIST 800-190 to use it as an example for this demo. And here we were going through each of the controls previously at a high level and some of the control guidances But what you'll notice in the top right of the UI is an export button. Now, if I click this, I'm able to download this page as a PDF. I'm also able to download the evidence as a CSV. If we do the latter and I look at this report, what this is going to do is give me a detailed CSV on each of these controls, what they are in terms of the description, and the current state of that in my environment. So you'll notice that for each of these controls, like 4.1.1, 4.1.2, I either have a pass or a fail status next to it. The evidence column is really where it's going to provide the passing or failing and the rationale behind that. So for example, in the second one, I'm failing because I have no policies being enforced to eliminate privilege escalation or excessive privileges within my container. So in line with the control guidance that we went over in the previous video, what this is basically doing is giving your internal stakeholders and your auditors the ability to see how you're doing with these controls and what additional things need to be done in order to bring it into compliance. So for each of the standards, this is an option. It doesn't matter if I click on NIST or PCI or HIPAA, I will have the ability to export these reports. And the other thing is that we have a very rich API where you could actually begin to get these reports from the API if you wanted to as well. So under the compliance service, you'll notice that we can get run results, we can get aggregated results, and we can list the source of what we're looking for inside that API call. Next, let's cover the ACS policies and the compliance capabilities and how those two are related. If you haven't already looked at the other enablement video for ACS policies, I highly suggest you look at that one first because this will make a lot more sense in the context of the compliance use case. So let's use an example of one of the standards that we've reviewed earlier in this video. We'll go to NIST 800-190. And the goal of this section is going to really be explaining how policies interact with each of these controls that you see listed within various compliance standards in the compliance tab. Let's use an example. So if we go down to, let's say, stale images in the registry 4.2.2, put the organization at risk because obviously older images come with older vulnerabilities. And the control guidance is to have built-in policies that detect if images are stale or old and should be updated by the development team. So you'll notice I'm at 0% for this right now. But if I go to my policies and I look at some of the default ones that exist within my environment, some of them will be able to help me with this specific use case. So if I look at a specific policy and I go to 90-day image age, which is one of the default ones, what this policy is basically doing is alerting me for deployments that haven't been updated within 90 days. So images that have an update but have not been updated within 3 months. Now, if I were to turn on this policy and reassess my compliance, it would bring that score for compliance up because now I have a guardrail in place that's actually notifying development teams and security administrators when I have not updated an image, and therefore it would be covered under that specific control for NIST. Similarly, we might have other things like PCI compliance. And so one of the things that PCI compliance asks for is in 6.1, establish a process for identifying vulnerabilities that are critical based on something like a CVSS base score. If they're high risk, we want to be able to rank them. We want to be able to categorize them as posing an immediate threat. And we want to be able to address these within any cardholder data environments. Again, because ACS has a default image scanner, and we highly suggest you look at the vulnerability management section to see how we do vulnerability management and scanning overall. But because we ship with a default scanner and we have policies related to this, we can leverage the policies in order to increase our compliance score for this particular control. So again, going back to the policy section, you'll notice we have different things that we can implement. Now, one of my favorite ones is this fixable severity of at least important. So what this is basically doing is this is identifying anything with a critical or high risk in my environment related to vulnerabilities that are greater than or equal to a certain severity ranking. And with this, I'm going to get many different violations in my runtime environment for anything that's currently violating this. But should I choose to actually enforce this policy, we would see that percentage of compliance go up. Now, not every single control is going to be related to a specific ACS policy. Where possible, ACS is going to introduce policies that will influence these scores. But you'll notice for things like CIS Docker or other types of standards, some of it's kind of black and white. And, specifically for CIS, things like ensuring that certain things are in place, it's either turned on or it isn't. And so those types of use cases would not be covered by an ACS policy, but would be covered by a specific measurement of things on the node from the compliance scan itself within ACS. Lastly, let's cover the compliance operator within OpenShift and the related integration inside ACS. If you've never heard of the compliance operator, this is separate from ACS, but it's offered under the operator hub within your OpenShift environment. So you'll notice in my OpenShift console, I've got the operator already installed, but if I didn't, I could choose the install path, the version that I want to install, and it also includes documentation here to familiarize yourself with what it does exactly. Now, the compliance operator is pretty interesting because what it essentially allows you to do is run default profiles, which are more specific to OpenShift, but also things like Arcos, RHEL, and others. So we continuously add new profiles, new regulatory compliance to this that are more tailored to OpenShift. And you'll notice here out of the box, we already have, with the installed operator, many different profiles like OCP4 CIS, PCI, NIST moderate, and the OCP4 STIG standard as well. Now, what I need to do in order to get this to populate within ACS is I need to create an associated scan setting binding. So I won't go into too much detail on what this is, but essentially it's telling the compliance operator which profiles to include and aggregate results for a compliance scan. Now, in my case, I've added CIS compliance, and what this is doing is it is including a reference to those profiles. So you can create these very easily by simply referencing the profile that you want to do and naming this. I've also done PCI compliance. So you'll notice I've got a scan setting binding for this. And once I have this in place, what the compliance operator does is it actually issues a set of pods that's going to go and run scans for those profiles. So for each of the profiles, you'll see that the status is done. Initially, you'll see a scanning and an aggregating phase before this. Once the scan result status is done, all you have to do is come over to ACS, rescan the environment, and you will begin to see that those profiles populate under the existing dashboard for the standards that you see. Now, the cool part of this is I could see these results through the CLI and OpenShift, and I could go through the OpenShift console to do that, but the goal here is we want to make this easier to consume. So for example, each of these results is being pulled directly from the scan setting binding and compliance results that were aggregated in that operator from the previous step. And I can immediately begin to see the control guidance that needs to be in place in order to bring this into a compliance state. So very, very specific control guidance that we bring in. And again, just like the other reports, you can export this for auditing and evidence. And overall, the design behind this is to make the compliance operator much more easily consumable and usable by an OpenShift administrator and security team. The other great thing with the compliance operator is that it leverages OpenSCAP technology, which allows you to define many of your own rules. And so for some of the advanced use cases, you could create a tailored profile that specifically has certain types of rules in that that you want to exclude, include, adjust, or amend for your environment. So you could create your own compliance profile that matches your organization, and you could bring in those tailored profiles within ACS. There's going to continue to be a lot of updates here, specifically as it relates to remediation objects. So that's the idea of the compliance operator being able to apply a machine config or some sort of YAML that would basically apply the control guidance that you viewed in the screen before. There is not a timeline on that, but there's a lot of interesting things that we want to do with the compliance operator, and we should continue to see a lot more development happen as we proceed into the next version releases of ACS. We hope this overview of compliance has been helpful. Please reach out to us if you have any more questions, and we'd be happy to take you through more details. Thank you. Have a great day.